And there it goes.
Okay, great. Can you send me the link really quick? Just in the, like the DM would probably be easiest.
Yeah, I'll do that too. Just do it in the chat because everybody here's on it. So.
Okay.
All right, that's ready to go, I think.
Probably be easier.
Yeah, I'll do that too. Just do it. Everybody here's on it. So. All right, that's ready to go, I think.
Yeah, and we're live. Just hit the record button here too.
Oh, we can do both. All right.
Yep.
Weird.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to kick it off here as we are live. Sorry for the delay. Okay. Welcome to our reading of Hegel's Science of Logic. This comes as a sequel to our reading of the Encyclopedia Logic in full earlier this year and last. I share with you my hesitation at such a great mountain to climb, but I think we're ready. And having scientific socialism in our blood, as it were, we are ready to give it a more systematized form through the study of reason. I'm Matthew Strauss of Columbus, Ohio, affiliated with the Central Ohio Revolutionary Socialists, and formerly of the International Socialist Organization, now defunct as of 2019. I got into Hegel thanks to Harrison Fluss and Doug Green, who is here, both fellow Marxists and Trots. If you could please introduce yourself, and we'll commence presently with a leadoff by myself, discussion of 40 minutes, and close with next week's assignment. And I'll head it off, or I'll hand it off to you, Kyle.
I'm Kyle Creasy, he, him. I'm kind of a recent leftist. I'm currently of Central Oklahoma IWW, Oklahoma City DSA, and Oklahoma City Socialist Rifle Association. I'm trying to think. So I think I started getting into Hegel after people were making comments about the dialectic and some Hegel when it came to capital. And I felt there were certain things I wasn't understanding, and so it felt interesting. Ended up falling in with, some of the group of us that are here to start Hegel, and I went from, and happy I went through there. So go ahead and go to order on my screen here, Doug.
I'm Doug Green. I'm a Trotskyist and a Marxist historian. I'm the author of 4 books: a biography of Louis Auguste Blanqui, Michael Harrington, a study of Stalinism, and a forthcoming study of neo-Kautskyism. I'm here just because I think it's important that Marxists study philosophy, understand our worldview, that we go back to figures like Hegel, Spinoza. Since I think there's a red thread going from Spinoza to Marx and Hegel to Trotsky and modern day communism. And I think in an age where irrationalism and other reactionary philosophies are resurgent in attacking, the left and popular movements, that it's necessary for Marxists to defend our worldview, so that we can ideologically arm ourselves with Hegel, with Marx. And, it's always good to just systematize your worldview more and to just arm yourselves in that way. So that said, I will pass it to Jim.
I'm Jim Farmelant. I live in Eastern Massachusetts. Long have had an interest in the debates within Marxism over Hegel versus anti-Hegelian tendencies. And obviously, Marx and Engels themselves started off by studying Hegel. So no matter what your opinion is of Hegel, if you want to understand the Marxist tradition, you should take a look at what Hegel did first.
Okay, and Dolce?
Thank you, everyone. I'm Dulce Corral, and I learned all of my Marxism and Hegel and everything from the streets first, actually, many moons ago, and then became a Brown Beret. So I'm an activist. I work with the United Panther Front as well, and then I took it to academia and had to be a force to reckon with because the institution didn't want me there. Became a professor, and so now I'm teaching actually some of my work that I did for my dissertation around extractive imperialism. But I also am starting a new endeavor teaching Aztec philosophy. And so doing that from a non-Eurocentric view is the endeavor I'm taking on, and very difficult one at that, since most previous literature does not tip their hat to any form of critical philosophy when addressing other cultures. And for me, I'll be revisiting this Hegel's Science of Logic. I haven't been with you guys for a little while because I was really busy doing all that other stuff. But I read this one years ago with the intention of using this as a way to back up some of the things that I would say in a lot of my activist groups and my international travels. I just got back from Argentina a couple months ago, got to go to Che Guevara's house in Alta Gracia, and there was a lot of writings there actually talking about Hegel and Marxist connections of the work that he did, obviously. And so I'm just really excited to reread this with you guys and get some different perspectives, also connecting it to my class that I'm teaching.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dulce. Okay. We will be using the stack system for the discussion. Basically, just type stack in the chat during the discussion in Zoom. And I'll call on you basically during the discussion portion. Thank you very much. I'm going to give a short lead off, and then we'll go into the discussion. If any questions come up for anybody at any point, just we'll keep this pretty informal. Okay, so this feels really big. Okay, so what is the science of logic? I'm just going to quote Stephen Houlgate to start off, because I think he gives a pretty straightforward answer. The science of logic provides an extensive analysis of the basic categories of thought. Abstract categories are thus what make it possible for us to have concrete experiences of things in the world, rather than a mere flow of possibly unconscious sensations. More specifically, what we're dealing with here is what Hegel refers to as speculative reason. And speculative reason, yes. So subject predicate propositions are used in everyday speech, are not sufficient for imminent development of philosophy, is basically what Hegel claims in his book. There's no language equivalent of the subversion of this form, however, so Hegel has to resort to them while modifying the procedure to render them different logically. Oh my, one moment. Didn't structure this very well, but I promise that this is going to make sense as we go along. Okay, so logically. Well, I'm going to leave that to the side for now. Hegel's use of speculative reason is bound up with his presuppositionless approach. Basically, yeah, sorry. Stage fright. What use is abstracting basic categories if you're just going to read them, read into them, in other words, a bunch of unproven assumptions and vague notions. So what we're dealing with here is an immanent system of categories with a development of the categories from within thought and only thought. And it's not just read off a list, although it looks like a list. If you open the table of contents, you can see a list of the development, but the actual logical development is entirely internal to the system. Page 6. Nope. Probably should have written all this out longhand. Okay. So Hegel, okay, I'm going to read this quote really quick because, just to round off speculative reason. And Hegel says, it is in this dialectic, as it is here understood, that is in the grasping of opposites in their unity, or of the positive and the negative, that speculative thought consists. That's going to make absolutely nothing. That's going to mean absolutely nothing to someone who's just coming to the science of logic. I promise it's going to make sense as we go along, exactly what that means. So, why read the logic? What is the subject matter of the logic? Well, put simply, it's comprehensive thinking. There's thinking, and then there's thinking comprehensively developed and systematized. Preliminary note here, why read the logic? Personally, I got into reading the logic to illuminate Marx and Lenin, who both read it and used it in their work. But now it's grown past that to something larger. It's to clarify this form and content so that the mundane content we encounter in life can be more clearly understood, enlighten us without the clutter of picture thinking or feeling mucking it up. And for me, a clear understanding of the judgment in the syllogism makes reasoning so much easier. One can, yeah, so there's that. Okay, so I'm just going to talk really briefly about the prefaces, and then we'll start the discussion. All right, in the first preface, wow, we're live. Great. Hegel begins by reflecting that the Jena awakening in Germany had not yet fully impacted the desiccated corpse of logic and metaphysics, and this was in 1812 that he wrote this. Previous to Jena, whose coterie included Goethe, as well as many of Hegel's friends, including Hölderlin, Schelling, and earlier than him, Fichte, as well as Schiller, I'm thinking. Yeah. So big intellectual sort of nexus happening at the beginning of the at the tail end of the 18th century and early 19th century. Previous to Jena, Kant and company colluded with practical common sense, according to Hegel, to abandon theory, in other words, metaphysics, and sort of leave logic itself picked clean to the bone, just for student use, as a sort of exercise. Logic was left a harmless school exercise, but little else. Hegel, in the first preface, calls for systemization of the principles of the new age. And readers at the time, I think, would have been familiar with what this means, basically developments in German thought, not only in 1812, but especially to do with that turn of the century milieu. Hegel indicates in the preface the necessity of a new scientific procedure. And I'm just going to read what he says really quick from a direct quote and try to. Okay, so Hegel says philosophy, if it would be science, cannot, as I have remarked elsewhere, the phenomenology, borrow its method from a subordinate science like mathematics any more than it can remain satisfied with categorical assurances of inner intuition or employ arguments based on grounds adduced by external reflection. On the contrary, it can be only the nature of the content itself which spontaneously develops itself in a scientific method of knowing, since it is at the same time the reflection of the content itself which first posits and generates its determinate character. So here it is in very skeletal form. He's going to tell us what it looks like, but in such abstract terms that if you haven't read the Encyclopedia Logic or other summaries before, it's going to seem pretty bare. But so he says the understanding determines and holds those determinations fixed. Reason is negative and dialectical because it resolves the determinations of the understanding into nothing. But it is positive because it generates the universal and comprehends the particular therein. Basically, the particular that disappeared reappears in the universal. So it doesn't really disappear, if you know what I mean. Just as the understanding is usually taken to be something separate from reason as such, so too dialectical reason is usually taken to be something distinct from positive reason. But reason in its truth is spirit, which is higher than either merely positive reason or merely intuitive understanding. So it's all rolled into one. It is the negative, that which constitutes the quality alike of dialectical reason and of understanding. It negates what is simple, thus positing the specific difference of the understanding. It equally resolves it and is thus dialectical, but it does not stay in the nothing of this result, but in the result is no less positive. And in this way, it has restored what was at first simple, but as a universal, which is within itself concrete. In other words, complete. A given particular is not subsumed under this universal, but in this determining, this positing of a difference and the resolving of it, the particular has at the same time already determined itself. And the determined particular within the universal is far more determined than it was at first as an immediate particular without that universal. Okay. This spiritual movement, which in its simple differentiatedness gives itself its own determinateness, and its determinateness, its equality with itself, which therefore is the imminent development of the notion or the category. This movement is the absolute method of knowing, and at the same time is the immanent soul of the content itself. Okay. So Hegel rounds out the first preface with a few sentences explaining the relation of the science of logic to his earlier Jena phenomenology, what we know of as the phenomenology of spirit or mind, depending on the edition you have. Without going into too many details, the Jena phenomenology is the earlier work, the one everybody is familiar with, especially in the Anglo world. It's probably the most familiar cover, the gold or tan cover that everybody's seen. The further development of the phenomenology as an immanent part of Hegel's system shows up in philosophy of mind in a more developed form, and basically he relegated the Jena phenomenology to an application of the logic, albeit to the earlier one. Okay, so it's 9:23. I'm just going to really quick hit the second preface. There's a lot to it, but I'm just going to hit it really quick. In 1831, Hegel wrote a second, longer preface, speaking first of logic as man's nature and its expression in language. He indicates that philosophy need not have special terminology, and talks about how modern scientific development has already shown how even overt logical forms like polarity have found common usage, albeit naively. These things were developed in the common parlance and then sort of applied to everything, even things that didn't exactly fully articulate it at the time. I'm sure that a lot more have emerged in our sciences since 1831. In fact, I'm almost positive or negative about it. Never mind. Hegelian joke. Wow. Okay. Hegel goes on to comment about the need for leisure time to philosophize, and he refers to Aristotle with this. He comments on how philosophical thought in 1831 is mostly still subjective and to do with concrete objects, while logic seeks to systematize and universalize these through the action of thought, categorically speaking. He talks about how natural logic is unconscious thought, basically. A conscious logical science includes and puts categorical I wrote this out myself, and it, so yeah. A conscious logical science includes and puts categorical relationality front and center, but does so presuppositionlessly. What does this mean? Well, it means that before you start with the science, you have to clear away everything you know and start with basically the top of the ladder that he gave us in phenomenology, which is absolute knowing. And absolute knowing being the unity of thought and thinking. The most abstract version of thinking is to be, is being, right? And really to start the logic, it's not enough to go from absolute knowing in the phenomenology to start the science. The action of abstracting what thought is as being is the further step, and then you begin. Content, he talks about content and form must be attended to, not just the content, as natural logic would have it. The notion is its result, and action attends to both. Hegel contrasts the instinctive and active thinking with the intelligent and free act of thinking, which is associated with his method. But yeah, let's see. Okay, there's a lot to talk about, so I'm going to round it off by just saying that the picture Hegel gives us, especially in the second preface, is one in which ancient metaphysics gave us a good, it's kind of a lopsided situation. So in ancient metaphysics, thought imbues the world with what do I want to say? With reality, right? Whereas in Hegel's time, it's gone lopsided the other way, where thought is apprehended by common sense as sort of this empty form, but nothing more. And everything in life is the content. In other words, what you see in front of you, the objects in front of you are, for the most part, the real world, but we can't reach it, especially according to Kant, other than creating representations for ourselves. And what Hegel is hoping to do is take that lopsided picture, the ancient here, and at this point, common sense in Hegel's day, and even it out to where you attend to both the thought forms adequately, as well as the real world, and see how they interact through us as an even and systemized treatment. Thank you very much for your attention, and we will go now into the discussion. I'm just going to say stack is open, and I know everybody here has read the prefaces, so you can just sort of launch into whatever your thoughts are. We'll keep it informal, and stack is open. Thanks. Real quick, Dulce, you said page 27 is transformative. I just want to address this really quick. You put it in the chat. What were you referring to really quick?
I was just letting everyone know what page you were reading from.
Okay. All right.
And then another comment that you made, I was saying, yes, it's transformative. So
Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay.
Kyle, thanks.
Yeah, just something I thought was interesting. I was reading through the second preface on page 35. He starts going through the things about, how so much we just kind of think through this stuff, kind of like activity in the mind and stuff. We never really think about us being in control in a lot of ways, as we probably are more conscious of obeying our feelings, impulses, passions, interests, not to mention habits, than having them in our possession, still less in view of our intimate union with them. And this is also kind of where he goes into, bringing out our actual freedom, where he gets to the point of, so it just saying, it reminded me a lot of also Spinoza's, and I'm not as familiar with it as I want to be right now, but Spinoza also makes basically the same argument. So it's just interesting to see that we're just continuing the same thing there.
Thanks. Stack is open. Just to let everybody know, I'm going to be keeping the comments since we only have an hour to about 2 minutes, but we could, you can have multiple sessions and whatnot, and there's only a few of us at this point. So Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of points in the first preface. Hegel was trying to locate his project in relation to earlier forms of philosophy. I think we discussed this previously we were doing the smaller logic. Hegel was, he talked about scholastic philosophy, what the scholastic philosophers had attempted to do, things like trying to prove the existence of God, like the Anselm's ontological argument and Aquinas' 5 ways. And he goes on to talk about, the rise of, critical of like Hume and Kant. They basically, destroyed that project. Hume, both Hume and Kant had demolished most of the traditional arguments for the existence of God, and they had destroyed the traditional metaphysics. And basically Hegel was trying to find a way, I think, a way of refounding the metaphysics on a new basis. If you've gone through Hume and Kant, where do we go from there?
Thanks, Jim. Stack is open. Dulce, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that when I went back to look over my notes on both of the prefaces, there's a lot of years there in gap, right, where he's reassessing himself, of course, in the second preface. And I thought it was interesting because he's kind of calling all other philosophers out, that they would also need to go back to their original works and do the actual method that he's talking about in the first preface. But he chooses not to, obviously, because this is a larger volume, and it would just take him an incredible amount of time to do so. But I was actually in favor of the first preface versus the second one. In the second one, I start to get more pissed off, only because, and I love Hegel and I still study Hegel, but for my own personal reasons, right? But I'm so interested in how we're going to unpack some certain concepts. So the idea of consciousness and when it arrives is always really important to me, because I am Mexica. I'm from Mexica tribe. And so my ancestors believed in metaphysics, their cosmovision largely believed that everything was sacred and that everything was alive and that everything had a conscience, that Mother Earth has a conscience. Rocks, that means everything on Mother Earth, everything is alive and everything is sacred and everything has a conscience. And so it's always been a mystery to me to read other philosophers' ideas about consciousness. By the time he gets to 1831, I appreciate that while he's still grappling with this idea of consciousness, and he's arguing against Aristotle, as he should, because Aristotle was really wrong about some things, he also brings in language. So he's bringing in communication. Again, my own ancestors believe that because everything has a conscience, then everything also can communicate, that everything has a language. And so then this is interesting to me, because I appreciate Hegel turning what you're talking about, the speculative thought. It's giving its legitimacy in the field, right? Because he's creating it as a scientific method of knowing, which, I mean, he shouldn't have had to go through volumes to do, but, people were funky back then, right? And today we can accept that a little bit easier. But still, metaphysics, sometimes even with a lot of my communist comrades, are still very much sidelined. And we look at morality, we look at ideas, and we say, no, you've got to stick with the material reality. But Hegel says our lived experiences, which is something that new academics like to play around. Oh, look, I have my narrative and my lived experience. I'm like, you guys need to go back to the beginning, So that's what I'm drawing from revisiting that. And those are concepts that I really hope we get into. Thanks.
Thanks, Dulce. Stack is open. Looks like Brian might be trying to come back on. He tried to come on several times from the beginning all the way until now. He may be having trouble with his app, or maybe just watching. I'm not sure. That's okay though. I'll just put myself on deck really quick. Oh, great, Brian, wonderful. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, and just stay on and feel free to chat at any point if at us if you have a question or a comment or anything like that. We'll try to address it as we go. It's 9:37, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about what Dulce brought up with consciousness and thinking. And after having gone through the smaller logic, the encyclopedia logic, which doesn't have the transitions and so is like a fraction of the size of this one, it doesn't give all of the development. But one thing that really comes across, especially in his introductory paragraph, and the main reason why he develops a system of thought and thinking and also consciousness in the way he does, restricted to human thought, is for a very simple reason that we, with our human thought, only have access to human thought. We can speculate, and I use the term not in Hegel's usage, but just the common one, about what the thoughts of animals or other things in the universe are. But because we do not have access to like their heads, we aren't them, right? And so the only thing that we can say for sure is what human thought entails. And so that's really all you can write down in a systematized form, using, I guess, what we know. I kind of find it hard to talk about even at that level. But then again, that kind of goes with the whole of Hegel's system, is that even what is commonplace, such as the is and the rose is red, which we meet in the introduction and elsewhere, the is hard to talk about because we sort of take it for granted. It's what connects the subject with the object as a proposition, and so that's another example of what Hegel tries to bring. Oh, I'm going to stop. Doug, go ahead. Thanks.
Oh, if you still have thoughts to, okay.
My thoughts are very unorganized.
No, that's okay.
So sorry about that, Dulce. I can't give you a complete answer.
This is just something I was.
Sorry about that.
This is just something I was thinking of based on some opening remarks and looking through Holgate and the introduction, which I know is a bit ahead of this, but the whole presuppositionless and why that's so important is, if you, because at first, like when I first heard that, I'm like, what? How can you come at something without presuppositions? How can you do that? And I just thought, okay, let's like think of the most extreme. Like if I'm a fascist, the fascists say, think with your blood, think with your race. They have that presupposition of how to do things. And, that's, you're going to obviously, you're already coming at it with certain things already embedded if you come in with that. Or anyway, if you come at, philosophy with all that, whatever baggage it is, maybe not the most extreme fascism, but something else, you've already kind of tainted it. You are not approaching it, with reason, with speculative reasons, thinking, etc. You just kind of, you've already know what the end is. Is really confirmation bias in a lot of senses. But what Hegel's doing, it really is like out of the matrix, right? The only way Neo can make that jump is if he does like let it all go and just start fresh, start with just pure being. So if you can do that, you can like slowly proceed step by step. And it is actually very hard to do because like I'm constantly, when I'm reading the text, just like, it's always bumping against like my previous ideas on whatever it is. And it's a very hard thing to do, to just abstract that from you. And one thing I kind of got from the whole the shorter logic, the lesser, whatever you call it, is when you get to the end, the way someone described it to me, it's like, Hegel is telling you that you, me, but also all of us, can see the mind of God or the mind of nature or absolute knowledge. And that's the point of going through it, is that it's reason available to everybody. And if you actually cut out your baggage and you approach it, systematically, slowly, deliberately, rationally, and you go through to the end, which we did with the lesser logic, you basically can know the world. It sounds both cliche, but it's also very profound if you think about it. And it just really reconfirms to me, yes, I know my own presuppositions here, confirms to me about how radical a lot of this speculative reason is, that human beings can both know and change the world. And it's actually not beyond us. That may be a little too far from the prefaces, but just some thoughts. I'll stop.
Thanks, Doug. Stack is open. Just put myself on Stack really quick and just say some of my prepositions. I'm a Marxist, but I started out in the left as an anarchist and a liberal. And coming to philosophy with my presuppositions in the Marxian sort of school of thought. I came to philosophy to try to figure out one of the three planks of Marxist thought. One of them, there are three. One of them is English political economy, with some French thrown in. Then there's French utopian communism that goes back to Blanqui, and before that in the French Revolution. And then the third was German speculative reason through Hegel, and through a bit of Fichte, actually, if you look at the way Marx reads Hegel through that lens. That's neither here nor there. I don't understand it enough to give any kind of thoughts on it other than to say I've read that's there too. But yes, he was not a utopian. You're right. Blanqui was not a utopian, but several of the earlier French, yeah. Sorry about that. But having read Capital and then coming to Hegel, I began to see a lot more of what Marx was trying to do in his work, and Engels as well, that was sort of obscured by not knowing the philosophy that they sort of took for granted, the procedures of reason. In other words, when you look at chapter 1 of Capital, for example, you see him tackling the commodity, which is a category that is both a universal abstract, but it's also particular and singular in its, the fact that you can go to the grocery store and grab a jug of milk. And that's very concrete, that's very singular. You can hold it in your hand, but it can also take on dimensions that are particular. In other words, there are a whole bunch of milks from skim to 1% to 2%, and then you go all the way to the universal of food, as a subcategory, and it goes on and on and on. And he breaks out the commodity in its usefulness to us, as well as exchangeability, and goes from there. And when you study Hegel, you begin to see this use of categories of imminent development within a systematic framework, using the method of the logic, which actually is it's no cookie cutter template at all, but rather a method of abstraction and internal development in its own system. And that's been very helpful. I'll stop there. Stack is open. It's 9:47. Thanks. just as a side comment, imagine we'll be pretty busy in future sessions because there'll be more meat to chew on, especially in the actual content. With the prefaces, it's pretty straightforward. He gets to, the state of philosophy at the time, as well as the problems with the forms of either logic or thought at the time, and sort of proposes what he wants to do about it. And Dulce, I just said she can't wait to get to the chapter on quantum, which I'm totally with you. Hoolgate in his newer books actually has a rather lengthy breakout on the quantum. The quantum section, for those who don't know, in the Science of Logic, it's over. I think it's over 100 pages, and discusses the calculus, among other things. I'm sure Leibniz and/or I should know the English guy. What's his name? I should know him better than Leibniz.
Newton?
Yeah, Newton, and their sort of exposition of the calculus and what it has to do with the quantum in categorical thought. But yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I'm very interested because it's more than just using numbers. It's also, being able to, relate that to everything else. If anyone wants to get on Stack, go ahead. We have about 10 minutes. I'm going to say we have 5 minutes left in discussion, and then we can sort of. Oh yes. I did business calc and I did very well with that over a summer, but that is the extent of my higher mathematics, unfortunately.
I have a math minor, so
There it is. All right.
I had to do all calculus for my major. So yeah, I think help when we get there.
Please do. I'm sure you'll be a great help in our study. I'm actually glad to have a math major or minor in here. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, through the 18th and 19th centuries, there was a great debate over the foundations of the calculus. And after Newton and Leibniz, Bishop Berkeley developed a famous critique of the calculus. He did not like the concepts of the infinitesimals, and he said that those were not really valid concepts. But he admitted that the calculus worked in practice. But he said the calculus worked through compensating errors. So that's inspired mathematicians and philosophers to try to find a sounder foundation for the calculus. And that discussion will continue for most of the 19th century. People like Cauchy and Riemann, made their contributions. They basically tried getting rid of the concept of the infinitesimals. And they would probably, what they did is they would propose replacing infinitesimals with the concept of limits. But the concept of infinitesimals actually has not really died out. It's been, in more recent times, some mathematicians have revived it. And they basically try to find formulations of the concept that would stand up better under critical analysis. And some of that relates to both Marx and Engels had an interest in those debates. And a lot of people have taken Engels to task on that. And while arguing that Marx had a better understanding of what was going on then.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm not sure if I know enough to agree or disagree on that, but I do know that Engels left us his Dialectics of Nature notes, but Marx also left a lengthy sort of notebook filled with mathematical developments himself.
Yeah, he was one thing Marx realized right away that this had practical applications in political economy. Mathematical economics was just starting to get off the ground during Marx's lifetime, but Marx realized this had a lot of potential.
Unfortunately, the bourgeoisie turned it into a fetish in and of itself. So you ask an economist what's going on in the economy, and they can show you charts and graphs and numbers, but what these actually apply to are very one-sided in terms of what they're referring to. It's not the whole of the economy. It's this little piece over here we'd like to preserve, even if the rest of it, blows up. All right, we have a minute left. Anyone have any closing thoughts themselves? Just really glad that we're getting to this. I've been looking forward to this all year, and I know it's going to be tremendous. Every time I read these prefaces or the introduction or even small sections, I mean, it's like a whole different book, especially when I come back to it after, half a year or a year or whatever it is. And it's becoming a lot more solid in my mind, what he has in mind and he's trying to do. And I don't know, there's a lot that goes into it. Dulce, we haven't really decided exactly the program of reading. All I know is that we're not going to be reading it out loud, line by line, like we did. We did the entire small logic line by line. And it took us a while. We lost a couple people along the way. We picked up a few, and we ended up basically with the four of us, Kyle, myself, Doug, and Jim, finishing it out. With us, I imagine this time is going to be the prefaces. Next Monday will probably just be the introduction because there's a lot there to talk about in terms of the method that he's aiming for. And I've read in places Hoolgate, for instance, says chapters 1 and 2 are enough for a full study for one semester to really get into it. And I don't want to go that slow necessarily. Yeah, that's the book. That he gives the exposition. Basically, he gives you 150 some odd pages that explains the entire context of the prefaces and the introduction. And then he gives you the texts of chapters 1 and 2 shorn of a lot of extras. And then he gives you an extended commentary, which is about 150 to 200 pages long, in which he picks it apart, sentence by sentence, what's going on. And that takes a whole semester with him. With us, I'm imagining that we'll go about the pace of our capital group, and probably once we get into the main text, probably read anywhere from 15 to 30 pages per session, just depending on how it goes. Because again, even in the longer sessions, there's only so much we can read and discuss before it's going to overflow the hour, if you know what I mean. And this may take a while, but we're okay with it taking a while. So, just like the Capital Group, which we've been at. Doug, when did we start that? Capital started what, 2019 or 20?
No, Capital, 2021.
Okay, 2021, and we're about halfway through volume 2, and we've been reading it at about that pace. So I imagine this will take at least a year and a half to do. But that's only an estimate, if that answers your question. But yes, it is weekly, Mondays at 9 p.m. We may extend past 9 to 10 Eastern. We may come early. We may stay late. We're just kind of we're gonna kind of play it by ear as far as that goes. Our schedules are pretty flexible, depending on who else shows up besides yourself and Brian. And all are welcome, by the way. If you see this on YouTube and you're interested in reading The Science of Logic with us and sort of discussing any of the points, becoming more familiar with German philosophy that inspired so many, especially Marx and Lenin. Please join us. Oh, it's 6 p for you. Well, of course, yes, Pacific. Wonderful. Okay, so it's 9:58, and I just want to let you all know that the assignment for next Monday is going to be the introduction, basically right up to the beginning of chapter 1. And so if you're using the A.V. Miller, by the way, we're reading the Miller, but if you have the Giovanni, that's fine, because we're not really going to be particular about reading aloud and being very specific. So if you read the Giovanni or any other version, it's or the German, that's fine too, if you can do it. So from page 43 in the introduction all the way through to I'm going to say 80. Actually, that's a lie. Sorry. The introduction, thinking on my feet does not work. So page 43 through to page 64. And we'll post that and build a second event and do the whole thing. Great. If anyone doesn't have anything else, we are 1 minute to the end of our the broadcast and the Zoom meeting. We can actually stop broadcasting and talk amongst ourselves if y'all want really quick. But